Welcome to TradeTheNBA.com. This is John Supporters for the 8th of September. Well, Labor Day over, which means the start of both the election cycle and the return of normal trading. We have to giggle a little when we say normal trading under the Fed trade that's taking place at this particular time, still in the COVID response. So we've had our softness, which basically filled in the positive streams going back from right over here. We were still capturing some weakness within the general setup of it, which not to be surprised by in any way, shape, or form. As we base form right here, we are seeing steel from a DOC standpoint now above the negative 13.5. And it's just a matter before we start to see a turnaround here from any green or red stabilizing. Looks like they're still in a mode downward though. So we may have a little bit more time before that reset takes place. And of course, we're not seeing it in power mode 2 either. As we broke down from the peak levels that we were riding the entire reign that was taking place during August. And, we could see various manipulations taking place within it and the constant buying that just keeps pushing it. But then, at some point, you got to let out the air of the balloon, and that way you can blow it back up again. And hopefully the idea being is you do it from a more elevated level. Of course, this level is still very consistent with what our expectations were. I mean, as we move towards that 4,000, you're not going to get there overnight. They're always going to move it back and forth. And it's just a question of, what kind of recovery setup we see, whether we stop short of that 4,000 early or not. And that's simply a derivative of how soon things return back to normal. Because as it is now, as long as you still don't have people traveling freely and things like that, the inconsistency of any recovery is built into it. And that's only going to require more government expense, and that's a lose-lose proposition all the way around. From a NASDAQ standpoint, it's been a little weaker than the S&P, and that's because it's been stronger than the S&P. So it's just got a little bit more to backfill. A little bit stronger response from its DOC already. Likewise with its Power Mo, we're already starting to see the separation, so that could give it stability for turnaround setup there. From a gold standpoint, it's going to be holding on until there's a impetus to drive things either geopolitically or a significant move that indicates economic revival that would justify inflation as opposed to deflation. Right now, you're having a devaluation of currency, which people are trying to hedge against. That's what we're seeing mostly in that. And of course, the inflated euro. Now you have Britain giving their deadline on exit, which that's all just a bunch of nonsense. Where we're seeing the first time is pullback in oil, simply because they've sustained it for all this time, but at the end of the day, there was an expectation that by now you would start to see some kind of change in policy, and with the inconsistency of states still wanting to hold on to lockdowns versus the Swedish model, it's going to be trouble. If you get a negative cycle in oil, it's going to cause a deflationary spiral that really will be devastating on one end and really force government action. And of course, with the gridlock in Washington, we knew that a second stimulus once we got past the middle part of summer was not going to happen. And that, in fact, has been the case because Pelosi decided that it was in her best interest not to make a deal to help struggling individuals so that they could, blame the difficulties on Republicans, and then you get the chatter back and forth. And so that's going to be a constant, and that's slowed, I think, the market advance. I think if that had been approved, you would have really seen market propulsion. So we have our shortened day there. What it was is basically we were at the highs, we filled in some higher positive extremes from earlier before, made the new low right down here, and then pretty much bought up during the low hour opportunity of what I call free money for them, which is the European session or even Asian session, where they're able to get away with it. And in this particular case, once the pump was done, now we've got the dump that there really wasn't anything from a positive extreme standpoint or anything like that that needed to be filled. This was just run up, let loose, and wait for the big players to actually return back into the game, which will happen a little bit later, so it should start to get a little more exciting, and it's always fun to see that happen. As always, though, relevant items I will be putting in the Skype chat. It's hard for you to see on this one right now, but if you look at the bottom long algo number, we've got a little bit of a transition taking place there. This is an adjustment that will correlate to buy signals with the Power Mode 2, as well as DOC, giving it better justification and also preventing, well, like situations like this where you'll enter mid-range up high in a declining setup. So that's the idea. We'll see how effective that becomes when it's put into the paint. So that's the next step that's taking place right now. So throw that one out there. As always, though, I will put anything relevant on the Skype chat. Have a good one.